Hey Joe, how are you?
Hey, what's up?
I'm good, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to have a chat with me today. How
Yeah, of
is everything
course.
going on this side?
It's going good. Just about to take off on a trip just in a second. So, just corralling my
Yeah,
kids and
I see.
yeah, just packing and all that fun
You're
stuff.
on
So,
the go, man. You're everywhere now. You're like moving from places to places all over the world. I can see
hmm
that from LinkedIn, and this is also why I'm happy to talk with you because you're one of the guys that inspires me a lot into whatever you do in data. So, how
Cool.
is everything like? How do you cope with all of these travels and stuff?
Uh, I mean, it's just kind of part of the territory, right? So it just
Yeah,
it is what it is. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but I don't mind it. It's not for everybody, but I think it works with the lifestyle for me and for my family. So yeah,
that's
how
cool.
do you cope with it? I guess you just accept that it's just part of the process and just part of the
Yeah,
work.
it's what you
So
have to do. You got to do what you have to do.
just got what you got to do.
Nice. Yep. All right. So, just for the context, so this is a podcast that I'm putting together recently. It's called the Dream Podcast for data rules everything around me. I'm trying to talk
Nice.
with all the inspired people, everything that inspires me. If you know the Wu-Tang Clan, you will get the reference
Yeah, I was
with
gonna say
the
you gotta get the Wu Tang Clan on your show at some point.
yeah,
So um,
yeah. So because Nas is also reference to hip hop and to things, and I
yeah, I
see
was
all
wondering if you
the
came up with a name because I was like, it seems a lot like the rapper,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So
yeah,
you
but
know
with
my
an
influence
extra
now.
A. No, no, I'm no, we on the same wave. Like when I was giving a talk in Vancouver, actually, over last Friday, I threw out a Wu Tang Clan reference. A few people got it,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I like it. I like it. Okay, so and I saw your picture in front of the Berghain in Germany and everything. So I was like, okay, that guy, I'm gonna catch up with him very soon.
yeah.
That's
Not
for
a lot of
sure.
people catch that reference. Everyone's like, "Oh, he's in front of like a disgusting building or something with a bunch of graffiti." But yeah, that's
Yeah.
Burgoyne. Yep. So
I don't know how many of us in data are like so much so big fans of music, but I found a few people are really feeling. I think it's the thing about the instrument, right? Data and coding and everything, they are instrument for us to build and do our craft, right? So I think
yeah,
it's around that.
we're all artists in our own little way, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So the idea is to go free flow on three questions. What's your story? Where do you come from? How do you get there? What's your mission? What's your drive? Why are you doing this today? And what's your vision of the future? Like, do you have any insights or any cool stuff that you see that you want to share? So I'm not going to go and come back with the question. We are going to just keep these three questions in mind. We
Mhm.
have 30 minutes to go, and let's have a free flow conversation.
That works.
Good. So where do you come from? Who are you, Jory?
Okay. Who am I? Let me see here. Yeah, I mean, I guess originally from Omaha, Nebraska, which is the middle of nowhere. Grew up in Wyoming, which is also in the middle of nowhere, probably more nowhere than Omaha. But yeah, then spent a lot of time just kind of dorking around, rock climbing, and that's how I ended up in Salt Lake City, where I currently live. So I
Cool.
thought I'd be here for a few weeks, and that was moved here in 98, 1998. That is so. It's a while ago, but yeah, I went to school here, studied mathematics. Thought I was going to get into being an actuary, but decided instead to just get into use that training, I guess, and use it for analytics. And I guess whatever the hell you call data science these days, it's kind of what I was doing back then. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, so then I've always had some role in data, but back in the day, it wasn't like now where data was sort of a standalone thing. I mean, you more get a job working in different functions, and if you had skills in data, you would apply those skills towards solving business problems with data. That's pretty simple. So it was a lot
Mm.
simpler times back then. I kind of miss those days, but we are where we are right now.
You mean when
Yeah,
you were
then
more connected to business business stuff?
yeah, yeah. I mean, you mentioned that you're involved in finance for a long time, and
Yeah.
I kind of miss those days when you're just focus on solving real problems and not having, I think, the word data thrown in your face every 5 seconds. And that's the,
I see what you mean.
the
Yeah,
thing that which you got to be doing. Because I think it really distracts from the ultimate goal, which is just solving problems. So I think we have a
I
lot of
agree.
nice tools and a lot of nice practices these days. But I think all too often I think we overweight a bit on data. The rest of the business, um, they're just focused on getting their job done. so,
Yeah,
so, but
true.
anyway,
So
yeah,
you started with math. So you're coming from the tech side more if I understand well. So how did you
yeah.
connect with businesses? What was your first connection with business people? Who inspired you at that time to solve problems?
I mean, I'd always been technical. I think I've always been kind of analytically or mathematically minded, and so I think the person who really forced me to focus on the business was my first boss, Dennis. He was the CEO and owner of this company I got my quote real job at, and he I don't know what he saw in me. Probably not a lot, to be frank. But he saw enough of me to give me a chance, right? And I think that so he, at the time it was a very big consumer packaged goods company. I wouldn't say big, but we were definitely getting started. I think when I joined, we were in the upper tens of millions of dollars in revenue, approaching
Already, yeah.
nine figures and whatnot. But it kept doubling every year, and so me and this other kid, we sat outside of the CEO's office, and we're basically his numbers guys. So any question he had, we'd go answer it for him. I think that was a huge
Mm,
amount of trust to put into a couple youngsters, but I learned real quickly, about I guess, the kind of duality of data and business, right? You're making a lot of big decisions on millions of dollars, and on a daily basis, and like, probably not unlike finance, but I think the stakes are a bit more real because in other cases you're playing with in finance you're playing with a lot of money's traded so frequently and such huge amounts, whereas if it's family money it's a bit of a different story. But I'm trying to grow a company, but that's the situation I found myself in, and I really like that. It's sort of intersecting with business people, and if data was a way to solve problems, and we'd figure out a way to do that. So I really like that.
cool. And at that
Yep.
time, I relate a lot because I started my career also with connecting with boss executive people who
Yeah.
wants to have something better than gut feelings. So I always connect with them on that. Like most of the decision, it's about decision making and how to solve problems, right? And at the end of the
Yep.
day, humans are like going with their guts all the time, and data is just here to orientate and probably change their mind. It's really hard to get into the head of an executive who wants to do something and then you have data that says otherwise. I remember
Yeah.
in the position that I was in, I got really bad with an executive because I was saying something that he didn't want to hear. So
Mm.
did you face that sort of stuff also at that time?
I would say sometimes, right? Like you're always going to say something that maybe isn't what people want to hear, but I think the reason I was trusted is because you know, I, I didn't let that get in my way. I was like, well, I mean, early on, I was kind of known as being kind of no bullshit, right? So,
Mm,
just saying it as it is, being able to back it up, and if you like it, great. If you don't, that's your deal. So,
yeah.
but I think that having that sense of candor, having that sense of honesty and transparency, it does get you the trust of if it's the right person, right? Obviously, if somebody doesn't want to believe what you're saying, then they're not going to believe you, and
Yeah,
you get
but
a problem. You
sometimes,
get a
yeah,
problem on
there's
your hands.
politics.
There's a lot,
The
yeah.
politics. Yeah, what's your take on the politics? And I really like where this is going because I relate so much on this. Like you be candid, say what you have to say, do what you have to do. And if you don't believe it, it's your call, man. At the end of the day, you take the decision. So if you want to deal with internal politics and everything, that's another subject. And I came to understand late that it's part of the game also. Like you have politics and you have data and you have people reinforcing the data. So
It's a game. It's
I
a game you got to play. It's a game, and the deal is the game is again. Sometimes it's a game that you can play. Sometimes it's a game that you won't be able to play. Right. Sometimes executives, might see you as a problem. Right. So that's a politics
mhm.
game, and so I think you just got to know. as a data person, especially, right, unless you're the one making the decisions, right, you're very much a support function at the end of the day. You're there to help
Exactly.
enable decisions. It's not your job to get in the middle of whatever turf wars are happening, right? So that's where you got
Hmm.
to remain objective. You might be called upon to provide insights or answers that might sway a discussion in a certain person's favor, right? You got to be the thing I tell people is, you getting hired because you have all the technical chops. You can write SQL, you can do whatever, you have stats background, whatever. Like that's table stakes. Like that to me is like the bare minimum to get the job. But what
Hmm.
really sets you apart is like having the situational awareness to know the game you're playing, the game other people are playing, and know where you need to know your role in all of this. Um, Again, you're typically not the one making the decision; otherwise, you would have a different title. So,
Yeah.
know the game
So
you're
be
playing.
aware, be conscious of the game, right? That's what you mean.
It helps. It helps. I mean, the people I see, who I think people are getting smarter about this, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely easy to get caught up in something that you didn't think you'd be caught up in. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. Yeah. True. True. So how did you start your journey in terms of coding? What was your first language you learned? Was it Python? Was it SQL? Was it what do you see? What did you see first as the go-to for solving business problem with data?
I mean, back in the day in the '80s and stuff, my friends and I were dorking around writing we wrote like an inventory tracking system for like our fireworks and stuff for some stupid reason. We thought those were like something worth tracking, so we did that. But I mean, I started making websites back in like the late '90s, early 2000s. So I was a
Hmm.
quote webmaster, if you remember what that job was. Um, and then I kind of fell out of, I would say, hardcore programming for a while, to the point where I did a quick stint at the University of Utah way back in the kind of late 2000s, just to sort of recalibrate. I was going to maybe go do a master's in computer science. I was like, I don't really need this. So we can do all this stuff on my own.
But you asked yourself the
Um,
question at that time. You were like, I need to go back to school and get some more what? Some
I mean, I was kind of like, maybe I want to go a lot more technical, than I was. I mean, I was always
oh,
really
okay.
technical, but I felt like,
Okay.
maybe I want to, develop more apps or that kind of thing. And so,
Okay.
and I mean, I think
Okay.
the
Okay.
world the world I'd left, or when I'd stopped making, websites. I mean, a lot of things had evolved since then. I wanted to, maybe make iOS apps, and which was kind of cool back in
Oh, I
the
see.
late 2000s and stuff. So it's like, I spent a bit of time there, and I was like, yeah, it's kind of dumb, big, huge waste of my time. Like you can there wasn't. I mean, it got caught up to where I was, and I was like, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll just. But in the back of my head, I was always had more of an interest in machine learning. I mean, I'd always been fascinated by AI, even in the '90s. I grew up on reading cyberpunk novels and stuff, so like AI
Yeah.
featured prominently in those, and
Hmm.
I was like, that'd be kind of fun. And then it became more of a reality, I would say, in the late 2000s, early 2010s. So, that's the decision I made. I was like, I'm going to go full on into machine learning. This is a decision I made, I think it's maybe 2009 or something like that. So I started, making the path to get there. And that's, it was another reason I wanted to go back to school. Maybe I could study that. There wasn't data science back then, right? And so, again, I had the mathematical background, and quickly realized that the school wasn't going to help with that. So I decided, oh, well, let's do this on my own then. So I think some
Hmm.
popular machine learning frameworks at the time. It was all Java based back then. This was before Python, I think, was becoming the sort of the lingua franca of data.
All
And
right.
so so you had Weka and a bunch of other stuff, and so around that time, met some people who were doing a automated machine learning startup, and so I joined them as they think their first software engineer hire, or second, or something like that. And and so that was the big transition point for me. Was I guess we were doing, so the whole notion was, it's pretty commonplace these days, but back then that was a new idea. Like, give us a data set and we'll give you predictions on the data set, and
Yeah.
whether it's classifications or regression type predictions. And so that was a good eye opener, because what I realized is the algorithms part, right? Again, this was even before deep learning, so it was just support vector machines and tree-based, ensemble learning, and um, that was relatively simple compared to the tooling you'd need to build to enable automated machine learning, right? So one of the first things I did, and this is where I got my kicks with Python, was me and this other kid. We developed a way of doing automated feature engineering on unseen data sets. So you got to remember, there was no rubric for how to do this back then. It was like you're just
Okay.
making this
Yeah.
up as you go along. So there were no frameworks that we could tell, and um, so that was an eye opener, right? Because then I was like, okay, so the hard problems that we're going to be facing with data, especially as this data science thing takes off, is how do you build the foundation, to
Yeah.
do these things in production, right? So we were working with like
Yeah.
hosting models and all this other stuff, and creating pipelines for training and retraining machine learning models. And so that was the eye opener for me, where I think everyone's attention was on the algorithms part, and like, oh, you gotta learn how to do all these cool machine learning algorithms. I think it's nice and it's cool, but at the end of
Yeah.
the day, like the harder thing for me was all the engineering that went in behind that. So that's where I got my start, kind of,
Hmm.
to where I am today. Again, just a natural curiosity and a recognition that machine learning and and whatnot was cool. But also I think my interest in apps, I think that played a role in it, because how do you make um, kind of how you tie it all together, right? Because machine learning on its own is nice, but it doesn't really amount to
Exactly.
much
I
if you
I
can't have the
agree.
interaction. Yeah, so it's
Hmm.
just that was a good thing. I think technology, enabled by cloud specifically, and machine laptops are getting more powerful, but yeah, I was definitely excited, to delve into that. I was kind of tired of what I was doing, when the business facing stuff is a lot of fun. I think it definitely helped you emphasize, uh, focusing on problems that matter, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to do that with a business person who's sort of working on problems that, well, you really could actually like work on problems that don't matter. I'm totally lying, but it's you're a lot more aware of the cost and the ROI on these types of things. So
Yeah.
it was a fun thing, but
True.
it got me to where I am today. So
So you if I summarize it, you got heads on business problem, then figured out like automated machine learning or machine learning was becoming something that you needed to look at, and machine learning went for a while, algorithm went for a while, but essentially you saw the importance of data, and here comes the data engineering big piece that you've been advocating for, where we need to have better data, so we need to build better pipelines, so we need to figure out how to do that more
yeah,
efficiently.
I mean, even back in the early 2010s when data science was becoming the hot thing, I'd commented to people that I think this whole thing is it's great. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves with machine learning, and you can go back and find articles I've written on this. It's
Hmm.
but even back then, I just realized it was. I mean, I appreciated that a lot of people are enthusiastic about data. That's super cool to see. I also felt like a lot of the stuff was going to fall on its face precisely because we're skipping over the most important parts, which is like building the
How is it
technical
useful?
and yeah, how's it useful, right? Because
Yeah.
every person was getting into data science and graduating was like, oh, so when can I start doing machine learning? I'm like, I don't know. When do you have data? Do you have ways of getting data reliably? Do you have
Yeah.
if you make a model on your laptop on a notebook, like what are you going to do with it after?
Yeah.
You know,
Where does it go?
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
I think
I got caught up
there's a
into
lot of
that.
hype around it. So but
I
it
think I
happens.
think everybody got caught up into that at one point, because there's some this magical stuff that may solve the problems. I think the human brains are like, I believe that this is a one silver bullet that can do it all, and then we realize that no way, there is multiple things that you need to figure out, and it's always, I think, is it a bias in our brains that we think that okay, this is the solution for everything, and then we realize that eventually it's not, and then we start digging into how to actually do the work.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that every time something new comes along, we're enamored by it, and because it seems like it's going to make life a lot easier. And I think long term, it certainly does, right? But short
Hmm.
term, it's like diet fads or something.
Yeah,
Like
I see what you mean.
and in the company I used to work at, the one I mentioned, I mean that we had a lot of dietary supplements, so I'm no stranger to the selling hopes and dreams to people, and it's very similar in our profession, right? We like to think we're really smart, which we are. Um, But at the same time, I think there's definitely just a natural level of enthusiasm, and I would say probably gullibility
Mm,
with anything. Where if it seems like a shortcut, let's do it, right? I mean, we're in there right now with generative AI and
exactly.
Chat GPT. I mean, it's no different than what I'd seen before. I think it has a lot of potential. Um, the short term, I think very quickly companies are going to realize the limits of this kind of stuff, though, and um,
Yeah, I'm
but
into it
long
right
term, it
now.
has a lot of yeah, it has a
I
lot of
see it right
potential
now.
long
Yeah.
term. Yeah, it happens, but
Yeah,
this
but
has
right now
happened
you're like,
before.
oh, but okay, so it feels like not so many people have realized that building apps is different from actually building data apps. That you don't behave differently. I recently came to realize that those people that I was talking to, they don't. Okay, they see software development as a thing. It's really deterministic. You know how to do, you know how to build stuff. It's like a feature, it's a design you need to follow, it's some HTML, CSS, JS that you need to put together to have interactions. And then when you need to put data into it, it's just another game. It's just complete other approach that you need to take if you want to have quality all the time. And now it seems like we need to relearn again that building such systems is not so straightforward, and you need to take care of many different aspects that people don't see as critical at the very beginning. So I get
Well, I
you
mean,
on that.
because all you see is the output, right? So it's like with Chat GPT right now, it's I just want a chat interface on my data, right? And I wrote about this over the weekend. In my article on Substack, data modeling is dead, long live data modeling. But my biggest fear
Mm-hmm.
right now, and the reason I'm pushing really hard on data modeling, which will get to your other question about what's motivating me, and now in the future, is I feel like um, what we're trying to do as an industry really comes down to having uh, the discipline to do the right things. And all too
Mm-hmm.
often, we want to do the right things, but skip the hard work and the discipline to do the right things right. So, what does this mean? Well, with data modeling, for example, my biggest concern right now is that this whole wave of generative AI with large language models is actually going to fall on its face really soon. Because if you can't, we have a hard enough time doing BI right now,
Yep.
still in
Yep.
2023, which is amazing. And yet we're going to now just magically throw large language models on top of these same data sets, and somehow these large language models, these foundation models, are going to magically conjure up, um, correct, you know, coherent, and you know, uh, high integrity data sets and responses. I think that's uh, perhaps
Delusional.
possible. I think it's maybe delusional. Um, so unless these large language models can automatically fix all the problems, which I know that they aren't programmed to do right now, right? And so and here's the other crux, though. Even if the underlying data is correct, you still have the possibility that it comes up with the wrong answer because it might remix the data into a different answer that you didn't expect,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that
Yeah.
there's some notions now of throwing knowledge graphs on top of large language models and getting fixing the hallucination problem. But then it presupposes that you have everything in place to do knowledge graphs properly in your company.
Yeah. Can
So
we stop on that? It's so interesting. So what knowledge graph? Can we just come back on what it is and what it's supposed to be? Because I have a feeling that many have different definition of this. For me, it's a bunch of JSON file that's stitched together from different departments in the company.
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a way of encapsulating knowledge in a way that is easily traversable, right, in graph form. So
Yeah.
different concepts relate to each other. In a way, it is a data model of your organization, right? It's a knowledge
Mm.
model, I guess, to be pedantic about it.
So it's fields and columns. It's columns, and it's if
This
it was a
this tree.
spreadsheet, It's no,
Yeah,
yeah, so it's more complicated than a spreadsheet, right? It's like it's a
yeah.
tree. So
It's just how things. It's a tree. It's just how things relate to each other in the organization. Different concepts, right? So,
mhm.
but this is a notion of modeling, right? When you think of the notion of modeling, and I'm not talking about. I think when we say the word data modeling too, we get too caught up in oh, are you talking about Kimball or dimensional modeling and star schemas? Or are you talking about
Yeah,
the
yeah,
third
that's
normal
why I'm
form? And
asking
it's
stupid
like
questions.
this has nothing to do with it at all, right? What I'm advocating for and
Okay.
what I advocated in my talk last week was we actually need to get back to the higher level conceptual modeling, right? And logical modeling, which is how you sort of the transitory step between conceptual and physical modeling. But all too often, what we do is we start the physical model. We're like, oh, let's just lay out a bunch of data in like I don't know, a data frame, for example, or a table, and that's your model. Now, of course, it's a model. I mean, every instantiation of data is technically a model. It's a really crappy model in that it doesn't accurately represent the reality of your situation or your business or the thing you're trying to describe, and it may not scale to encapsulate other concepts that traverse along it, right? And so the whole notion is, I've been advocating for and what I've been thinking about is, if we can't get the notion of, especially conceptual, and then logical modeling correct now, we may as well throw these concepts to the dustbin of history and forget about it. But the consequences of this I think, are quite severe. So the race towards AI right now, I think, is a noble one. It'll make things a lot more efficient if the underlying data is right, and we can all agree that the outputs of these models are right. But how would you know if you don't have an overarching view of the concepts, the business rules, the processes, and the way data it relates to itself in your organization or between
Mhm.
organizations? I would call hogwash on this. So
Cool. I think I got your point. It's a
yep.
very deep subject, but at the end of the day, if I always start to simplify, and you tell me if I'm going too simple.
Well, I'm pretty dumb, so I like to keep it really simple.
Yeah, dumb
So
people can. Okay, I'm dumb also, so we can have some kind of dumb conversation.
so let's make it a
Uh,
contest. I'm dumb. I'm dumber than you are. It's
I
okay.
don't know. I'm not sure. We can make a competition if you want, whatever you want. Essentially, I see business. If you come back to business and business purpose, right? So it's a funnel. You get awareness through content. You get then some interactions. Then you get some sequences of sales emails and stuff. Then you get some transaction in the finance game. So I'm trying to think about where NAS also can go and what can we bring in terms of data modeling. I'm thinking it this way: we need to have like a few engines that comes together, like content engine, growth marketing, sales conversion, for example, the top of the funnel. And then you have few concepts that you need to model around it, which is what is a post, what is an interaction for growth marketing. You need to figure out interaction so you get scoring about who is your potential lead and whatever. If you come back to sales, it's about sequences of email that you did and how do you match those sequences and or repeat the same sequence over and over again so you can transform more sales into dollars. So I'm really thinking it through very simple and basic dumb objects, which is a
Yeah,
post, an interaction, a sequence, a transaction. What is all of those things, and can we define them accurately as a standard? Because I think what I see missing in the game of data, and is not so. I mean, I think it's slightly better in the game of finance. Is finance standardize everything? When you know a
yep,
transaction, a swap, a spot, or whatever you're doing in the trading game,
yeah.
you know how many fields you have. You know what it is. Everybody talks the same language. It's not yet there in the enterprise realm. If I
I
make
think we're
myself
no, and I think we're actually moving backwards from that right now. You know, I mean, you have a
really,
data company, for example. Yeah, I think so. For various companies, there's no standards, right? So finance, for example, that's I mean, people have been doing what you described for a long time, and there's standards to it, and there's also regulations that kind of dictate how you have to do this stuff. So, but I mean,
yeah,
this is
yeah.
known stuff. You go to school and you study this stuff, right? I mean, but
Hmm.
you step back and you go to, I mean, I teach at a university, and I also see at other universities how data is taught, and it's I think we go through a lot of the tactics, right? But to the point of what you're describing, there's not there you might be taught certain standard ways of doing stuff, but then when you get into a company, well, okay, how are you trained to spot how things flow, right? How are you trained
Mm.
to spot the process maps or the value stream map or the information flows, right? I mean, most times you aren't trained at all to do this stuff for one. And so it's always a cold start problem. You feel like you're having to make it up as you go along, right? And like you're having to start from the bottom up and like discover these patterns and so forth. One thing I've been touching on though, which I think is an interesting tangent or aside to this, but related, is the use of data model patterns, right? So to your point, in finance, right? How do you track a swap? I mean, that's a known thing. People do this all the time.
Yep.
It's probably happened millions of times a day.
Mhm.
As I've been digging through and researching, and talking to people, back in the day, and I kind of call it sort of archaeology in some ways, but I mean, model patterns have been around for a really long time, actually. Conceptual model patterns, even. So how you describe, um, the process and information flows at a retailer? These have been encapsulated for decades, actually, in great books. They go through all the nuances of how retail works. E-commerce, same thing. The notion of a party and then the role that party plays, that's also been very well documented as modeling patterns. And so one thing I hope is that we can get back to revisiting these patterns and modernizing them, um, to be used in organizations. So there's a lot of value in this, because what it means is you're not reinventing the wheel every single time. It's like the
Yeah.
notion of a party and a role, for example, like a customer, in a store, for example, right? Or like we have an agreement together or something like that. Like that's a very standard type of thing that's been done for a long, long time. People have been buying things from each other and making transactions for thousands of years.
Mhm.
Why do you have to go and reinvent this? But what I see often, if I walk into a company, is the quote data model. Well, now everything's just one big table, so it's just everything's thrown into a giant table, and you just forget about it. But there's no sense of how does the data interact with other data, or what's the process, what's the flow, like what's happening in this, right? It's just a bunch of fields, and there's no process, there's no story behind it. And I think this does a disservice to say analysts, for example, or data scientists, because you get to know your data by the field and not for what it represents.
Yeah. Makes sense. And do you think that we, as a, I'm talking we as an industry, data industry, as if
Yeah.
I mean, but I'm not really feel like I mean,
No, it's just you and
but
me, Jeremy. It's fine.
yeah, yeah. Do you think that the data world in general and the business world could actually settle on a set of standards to make sure that AI models can be fed properly?
I don't know. I mean, as we're taping this week, I mean, you have two major conferences going on from two of the big data vendors out there, Databricks and Snowflake.
Yeah,
I mean, they're having it literally on the same day. Trying to bifurcate the attendees. So
one another. Yeah, that's so
so I
true.
think to your point, would we come to a kumbaya moment and have the standardization? I don't know. You tell me. Um, so I want world peace too. But
Yeah,
you know, I want mom and dad to play nice first too. That would help. But
yeah, yeah. I see what you mean. So that's not gonna happen, but eventually
probably
some set
not.
of rules.
I'm going to talk
All
about this
right.
today on the Monday morning data chat too, right? We're talking about the whole notion was data collaboration, right? And specifically sharing data sets, and in particular, public data sets and whatnot. And even there, it's hard to get an agreement on how you're going to share data and collaborate on it, right? The U.S., in the United States, for example, the federal government has different standards than state governments for certain data sets. How do you mix and match these data sets? Well, right now it's pretty hard, right? There's no standardization. So,
Yeah, I'm
and then
really
you talk
dreaming
about
of some high
companies. Sorry.
level kind of things.
Yeah.
I'm really dreaming about some high level kind of
I
entities
mean,
that are mapped,
I've
that
been
are
thinking a lot
set into
about
the stone.
this. I've been thinking about this, and I think that there's, it's something I wrote about in my newsletter over the weekend, in that article. And I think that, there's a couple of notions. One of it is this term I'm loosely calling data model ops, because we need another ops in this world. But
We need ops everywhere. We need
it's
some
almost a
squads
meme,
somewhere.
right? Yeah, we need
Yeah,
more
yeah, yeah.
ops. But the whole notion is, it's an over, because when you look at how data flows through the data lifecycle, right? It's not like a data model is a static thing. You have a data
No.
model in one area, and then it traverses another to
Mm.
become something else, a different type
It's
of
a living
model.
entity. It's a wave, basically. It's
Mhm.
just mapping a wave.
Right. So when you deploy these models, how can you ensure that you're still capturing the underlying concepts in a way that is traceable back to its origin, right? Or how does it mutate along the way, and how do you guarantee that at a conceptual level that these ideas flow? I think this is something that I haven't really heard many people talking about. Maybe because it's a stupid idea, I don't know. But I think to your point, these patterns and this is sort of where it needs to go, especially with large language models, right? Because again, like these are happening whether we like it or not. But I think we do need to put in place some mechanisms that enforce conceptual integrity and enforce
Mm.
sort of a ground truth, whatever that is. If you don't have that, the absence of a ground truth means complete chaos, right? You and I
You
could ask
mean,
the same. We could ask the same question to the same model and get different answers. That's how that is
yeah,
right now.
yeah, yeah. I've been
So
experimenting with this GPT, and you know, you know what we're building right now. So we're playing with those models, and we're like, oh,
yeah.
all right.
Oh,
So then
interesting.
I ask this, and this is that. So we need to like put some kind of prompting, very strict, like you should actually do this, and if you don't know the answer, you should not answer, and
But then,
you have some.
but then if you say that, why don't you just like save the answer that it output the first time that looks right, and then just like have it heuristically just say, if you're going to ask it this way, just give you the answer back. I mean,
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
actually safer.
yeah.
So,
Exactly.
I mean, but then you
Yeah,
could just
yeah,
use a regex for the form and just say, well, as long as you kind of ask it this way, here's your answer back, and then you're back
yeah.
to not having to use it at all, right? That large language model that is. So it's
Yeah, but coming back to this guy, the CEO asking his assistant to give the numbers for this kind of business report.
yeah.
When a CEO is asking his assistant about something, he's telling the stuff in a certain way. So
Mm-hmm.
we humans also have to not be delusional in how to interact with language model. We need to understand also how to ask the right question as if we were asking any humans. So I'm thinking about there is some arbitrage to do at one point because the
Yeah.
one model, one thing fits all, and no, that I think that's never working. It depends on the person or the model you're talking to, and you need to understand what this thing can do and so much things needs to be done so that people can understand what is at stake. I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting point.
Mm. I believe we touched on pretty much everything that I was really curious to get into, and we are almost already at the end of our time. So, is there
No worries.
anything that you is there anything that you would like to share? I like the long-lived data modeling aspect because now we have connected a bit more about it. I really feel that it's
Yeah.
missing, and for me, it's terrible to be like in this data world and having so much entities, so much stuff done different ways, sideways. And I believe really in standardization. Should we dictate how data modeling can be done? Is it the way? Is it the future?
Mm,
What should be the
actually,
way?
take I don't know if dictating is the right word, but I think we need to be
No,
open
no,
to
yeah.
all the techniques, right? So I kind of draw a comparison to mixed martial arts, right? So I grew up in the
Oh.
1980s. I think that the big question mark back then, in the 1980s was, okay, so Mike Tyson was like coming on the scene as a boxer and killing everybody,
Hmm. Yeah, true.
with his boxing, right? It was really good. But then the questions always the eternal questions. And I always grew up with martial arts, right? So the big questions was like, okay, so what would happen if Bruce Lee and Mike Tyson got into a fight? Like, who would win, the boxer or
Mm.
Bruce Lee? But Bruce Lee actually came up with, the notion of Jeet Kune Do back in the day. Actually, this predates mixed martial arts, and then Bruce Lee, his whole approach was learn all the aspects of martial arts, learn all the different styles, combine them, and find what works at the end of the day, right? And
Mm.
and I think that holds a lot of promise, for data modeling and for other aspects of our industry, right? And then fast forward, again with the analogy of MMA, the UFC that blew open the door of, you know, Because before it was always about strict fighting styles, right? So you
Yep.
had the Shaolin monk
Yep.
who, knew kung fu, and it was so dangerous he could never tell you about it because he would just kill you by looking at you or some crazy thing
Mm-hmm.
like that. You'd hear these stories, right? Then you'd always see
Yeah.
like, um, and everyone's very guarded about it. And I kind of think that's where data modeling is today. You have all these different cults and religions of data modeling, and what I feel needs to change is we need actually, as practitioners of data, we need to learn all the techniques and learn when to adopt them and when to use them. What's the best situation for them? I don't think there's a one true way of doing things. I think there's many different ways of doing things, and so being cognizant of that. And the UFC blew that open now. The mixed martial arts, it figured out what
Yep.
works and what doesn't. Right? I mean, it's very Darwinian in that sense. Like you're not going to go in there. Um, there's a certain basis of things you need to know. You may have some, different techniques that are truly yours, but at the end of the day, it was a great synthesis of all the different styles to figure out what worked, and I think more to the point, what didn't. So the Tai Chi master who's going to come into the octagon, I don't think he's going to have a good day. You know, he's going to get killed.
I
What's
see
going
your
to happen?
point.
So,
So
you know what I mean?
so
So
let's
yeah, I
dream
think that
about
we
that.
need to learn everything. I think we need to go back to square one and reassess everything from the ground up. So
And build
what's been
some kind
working
of
doesn't. Yep.
mixed martial art about data.
Yeah. That might
Yeah.
be the title of the new book. I don't know, but I think the whole point is, it's I mean, what's got us here won't get us there, right? So as an industry, we've been talking about the same crap for the last 20, 30 years. Adding more value with data, and this,
Yeah.
data modeling X versus data modeling Y technique. And I think these are the conversations that I think are partly what got us to where we are today, which is something that's not really working that well. So
Yep.
we need to figure out how to change it.
I think that's a perfect conclusion. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Joe.
Anytime, Jeremy.
It's
Thank
been
you.
a good conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time to sit with me, have this chat, and I really appreciate it.
Merci and au revoir.
Au revoir, Joe. Good.